months of inventory has dropped even more so than we saw last month. Everything's tightened up even further except for semis. They've kind of stayed the same. March 2020 was the most sales we've ever seen in Treb history by 22%. Like, that's a record-shattering number.
That's huge. Yeah, especially when we look at where all the other years come from, right?
March only makes it on this top 10 twice. One was in 2017, which was this absolute gong show of the month for sure. I keep saying that I feel like 2021 is like 2017 on steroids, and I think this kind of proves that that's true.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, we're catching up with Emma Pace, our Toronto realtor expert, and Emma's going to break down for us exactly what's going on in the Toronto real estate market at this moment in time. So again, these are kind of unusual times that are going on in the Canadian real estate market. It's more important than ever that you guys stay up to date on the data and don't get caught up in the drama of whatever's in the headlines. So this is why I really appreciate Emma. I think she does it the best as far as I'm concerned in regards to diving deep into the numbers. I think this is a fun one. I hope you guys enjoy it. Smash the like button, hit subscribe, and let's chat with Emma Pace. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with Emma Pace, our resident Toronto expert. Hey, Emma, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Matt. Yourself?
Good. So I'm excited to catch up and hear what's going on in the Toronto market. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster for us so far this year, and I actually haven't been paying as much attention. I feel like there's been a lot of other stuff in the news grabbing my attention. So I'm excited to find out from you kind of what's all going on. So high level, you know, what are you seeing?
I think the good news is I've seen a little bit of a slowdown since we chatted last. I know when we were last time we did this video, pretty much every sort of segment of the market, semis, condos, detached, everything was up, kind of north of 5% month over month. And we've seen that come down a little bit, which is nice. I think that has to do with the amount of activity that we've seen. So definitely seen a big uptick in terms of inventory, which is good, but things are moving very, very quickly. So I'm excited to kind of show you the stats because it was a pretty hectic March that we had. So yeah, we'll dive kind of like right into it.
All right.
So this month, actually, Zoocasa released a little bit of a different graph, and I thought it was kind of effective. So they released a quarterly average. So I have the monthly, quarterly, and annual averages to kind of go over. And so you'll notice quarterly, we were up about 13% for detached, 10% for semis, 11% for condos, and then condo townhouses, and then 5% for condos. So not quite double digits across the board for the quarter, but pretty darn close. From a month over month trend perspective though, last month we were about 7% for condos. We've seen it come down to about 4%. So the average price for condos is just over 700,000 now. The peak of the market was at 722. So when you and I chatted last, I thought that this month would close that gap. We didn't quite do it, but pretty darn close. Condo towns are up about 2.3% month over month, and semis have actually come down 2%, which is interesting, but definitely seeing a little bit more inventory in the segment. So I think that kind of has to do with it. And then detached are up about 4% as well. So that gap of condo and detached pricing, every single month so far, we've seen that widen. It's flattened off a little bit this month, which is interesting. And then kind of looking at the year over year changes, since last March, I think obviously next month is when we start to see those crazy numbers because April was really the first month that came out with the, real COVID lockdown. So, just shy of 20% for detached, 11% for semis, just shy of 10 for townhouses. These are freehold townhouses, just so everybody knows. And then condos are still down a little bit. It's actually probably closer to 2%. I did a little bit of a graph here. So the peak was 707. So this is maybe off a little bit, but we'll say between 1% and 2% down from the peak. So most of that pullback we've seen recover itself. And then condo townhouses are up, almost 15%. Obviously, with people looking for a little bit more outdoor space and stuff like that with the result of the lockdown, I think, these guys performed relatively well this year. So kind of interesting to see all three segments, month over month, quarterly, and then year over year. But again, I think next month will be an interesting month for statistics to, see some higher numbers up here. So I think the most interesting, like those those sales numbers in terms of pricing is obviously very interesting, but this was like shattering this month. So oftentimes we don't see March as a massive sales month. We really start to see sales volume really pick up kind of in spring market. But March 2020 was the most sales we've ever seen in Treb history by 22%. Like, that's a record-shattering number.
That's huge. Yeah, especially when we look at where all the other years come from, right? Like, you know, September 2020 barely scrapes into the top 10 here, but then to see that's almost like a 40-50% increase over the September 2020, which was a crazy year, like a crazy month if we look back on 2020. So that's, yeah, that's fascinating to see that volume.
Yeah, what I also thought was crazy is, like, looking at this top 10, March only makes it on this top 10 twice. One was in 2017, which was this absolute gong show of the month for sure. I keep saying that I feel like 2021 is like 2017 on steroids, and I think this kind of proves that that's true. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see March on this list again, but it's also crazy to see, you know, we're over 15,500 transactions and sales that have happened in Treb this month alone, and the next closest one just being, you know, 12 3/4 kind of thing. So it's a pretty substantial jump.
And I feel like this brings up a natural question then for the audience, which is like, hey, April seems to come up quite often. May comes up as well, but like, you know, April looks like the most popular month. So, you know, naturally, I think people are going to want to know, what are your thoughts? Do you see this trending into April? And then we've also got the added complications of a lockdown right now in April.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of factors that make me a little bit intrigued as to what I think is going to happen. One, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is the new stress test potential measures that may come in for June. So I think that that's going to add a little bit of heat for April and May, with people just trying to rush in and get, you know, properly under contract before June 1st. But I'm also seeing a ton of inventory. So I think the next slide is going to kind of speak to my thoughts even more so. But I also think what's crazy is this March, in comparison to all other Marches, we're 30% higher than any other March ever in Treb history. So record-shattering numbers from a sales perspective. Oh, just before I hop onto that next one, what I did was I went back. So I shared this graph, I think it was back in February. So these are just Toronto sales. So keep in mind, obviously, this home sale number is lower. But I went back and I kind of highlighted traditional March numbers kind of across the board here, right? And so if we, you know, continue to see when the bulk of the sales happen, it is between April and June. You know, April and June. Traditionally, obviously, this was when COVID hit. But I do think we'll probably continue to see that roll forward. Months of inventory has dropped even more so than we saw last month. So last month we saw, you know, sub one, like one or sub one for everything. Everything's tightened up even further, except for semis. They've kind of stayed the same. But I mean, 0.8 or below right now, which is pretty hectic. So months of inventory has tightened up even further. What that would, you know, what the question would be is, do we really have very low supply, or we have no inventory available? It's actually not the case at all, which is crazy. So we had the second highest month for most new listings ever in Treb history. So it's not like we aren't seeing new stuff hit the market. We're seeing a lot of new stuff hit the market, second most ever. But what I thought was probably the most interesting statistic of this entire month is this: 69% sales to new listings ratio. So pretty much everything that's hitting the market is selling right now. And we're talking like, what, 11% more than the next highest sales. So we're seeing like a drastic number of new listings. It's not like we're not seeing a lot of inventory. We're seeing a decent amount of inventory for the sales that are happening, but everything's getting sold right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see like that volume of listings compared to the sales. You know, it's great to see that more inventory is coming onto the market, but obviously it feels like there could still be a perfect storm kind of brewing here, at least for the next couple of months until those new rules come in.
Yeah, so I am really curious to see what's going to happen. You know, this next slide, I kind of gave my thoughts on these off-seat changes and what we saw last time with the stress test, because we did see some drastic changes, and I think, you know, my kind of takeaways this month have to do primarily with this new change. And based on my conversations with, you know, multiple brokers, and I do a monthly presentation for CanWise Financial, and they've obviously got some really good connections directly with the lenders. It sounds that this implementation is fairly feasible. I think most of the mortgage brokers and, you know, people on the financial side that I've had a chat with seem to think that there's a pretty strong likelihood that this could come into effect. And so I think for any viewers that are watching today, it's really important to understand that this June 1st implementation timeframe is for up to written contracts. So if you have a contract written in May, but it doesn't close until September, the old rules will be grandfathered in for you. And so what I think we'll probably end up seeing is a bunch of people rushing in with their old pre-approvals with the old low rates, rushing in to try and get the most house that they possibly can before their affordability goes down June 1st. Because with the new stress test rules, it'll be about a 4% or so change in affordability. And so does that mean that the market's going to crash? No. What I saw last time is that entry-level buyers just end up getting pushed out of the market. So everybody just kind of moves down a bucket. You know, guys who are looking in detached might be looking at semis. Semis go down to condo towns or townhouses, and the condo town guys go out to condos, and then everybody just kind of gets pushed down one bucket, and the guys that are at the bottom just scraping to get into the market are out, right? And it gets slightly more competitive coming downwards and maybe less competitive at the top. That's what we saw last time.
Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense. And especially when we are factoring in the affordability impacts of these changes, right? Like, you know, add on some of the recent changes we've seen in the past with, you know, CMHC not covering past $1 million and things like that. I think that it creates a lot of extra demand in the bottom of the price range for markets like Toronto.
Yeah. So I think my real advice for anybody that's watching this is if you are just pre-approved to get into the most basic home possible, like you're the first time buyer, you're scraping to get into the market and you are pre-approved, do what you can to become relatively aggressive and strategic over the next 60 days. Because if you don't buy in the next 60 days, I really do think that there's a 50-50 chance that you're in the market or out of the market until you just continue to save. So if you're right on the cusp of getting into the market, you should probably take this into consideration very seriously and strap your boots on for the next 60 days and try and lock something into contract if you can, because I think it's only going to get more challenging after June 1st.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important to realize too, what type of buyer are you? So if you're like buying this as your principal residence, you're looking to buy your own home, there's an emotional aspect to that, right? And I think that for a lot of Canadians, you know, home ownership, owning that condo, your first place, whatever it is part of their journey, or they're like, they just see it as part of like a checklist. And so if you're going to be emotionally bankrupt, if you're going to be really upset with yourself, if you have to sit on the sidelines for a year or two, I think it is important to take that into consideration and also understand that, like, I think personally right now, this moment in time might be better than most coming in the near future, right? So like during this lockdown, it adds a little bit of extra uncertainty. So a few people will be distracted by life circumstances and situations, and that could create a very temporary opportunity for someone that was like, you know, maybe you were just trying to time the market, but it was an emotional decision. And now you've decided enough's enough. I need to make sure I get in. If you're coming from that perspective, I think that like April could actually be the time to try and pull the trigger when there's still some confusion and chaos. Because if we go into an open, like, let's say the economy opens up in May, you know, I think that it's just going to be like, it's going to be on fire, assuming that history is any predictor of the future.
I agree with you. I also think a second kind of layer to that point is for anybody that's like, well, I don't want to just buy any house, you know, kind of out of FOMO with this market situation. It's not like you're not going to see a bunch of inventory, right? If we're thinking about historically, you know, the most diverse inventory is typically in the spring market. So if you're looking for, you know, the most potential options that are going to hit the market in your criteria, they should, in theory, be coming to market in the next 8 weeks. Like, this is typically when the bulk of the trades happen. So don't shy away from the fact that the right house won't pop up, because you'll probably see a couple of decent options in the next 8 weeks for anybody's criteria. So if you're kind of on the sidelines leaning towards doing it, this is probably a time for you to get actually pretty serious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like Emma said, making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success by being able to be as aggressive as we're comfortable with.
Yeah, you need to get prepared. To be very, you know, frank, this process of, you know, buying your first house, if we're thinking about first-time buyers and stuff like that, you probably need, you know, 2 to 3 weeks in terms of preparation from the time that you get pre-approved, with the way that the banks are backed up right now with all the refinances and obviously transactions that are happening. It's taking them a little bit longer to get you pre-approved, and you need to go through a bit of education as opposed to just going out there and seeing houses and chasing your tail about how the process works. You need to be sitting down with an agent that'll do you know, in-depth consultation with you to explain how the process works, what's happening in your particular market, like we're doing here with statistics. So that way, when you do enter the market, it's just a matter of pulling the trigger. You've already gone through the education, and you've got a couple of weeks to get yourself prepared right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think one other thing is I've had a couple conversations with clients who are thinking about selling this year. I think if you are considering selling between Q2 and Q4, I would probably consider selling sooner, because I do think there's going to be some people who are rushing to market as a result of this change. And I think taking advantage of the heat of the market is, you know, probably not a bad idea. But one more thing that I'm really curious to see is we obviously talk monthly about that gap between condos and detached prices. And so what I thought was really interesting is this. We started to see this gap widen quite a bit here just before 2017. And so when I went back and I said, okay, well, when did they implement this? They implemented this in and around here. And if we see that regression towards the mean, and when the condo prices increased quite a bit, it's right here. Like, look at that drastic drop. This is a drastic drop because condo prices shut up. So this is that threshold between detached prices and condo prices. We usually see it hover around 2. You know, here we saw it kind of hover around 3 and then pull back to about, you know, 2.25. And that was right when they implemented this stress test and everybody's affordability got a little bit tighter. We didn't really see much of a change from detached prices downwards, but we saw a lot of pressure upwards in terms of condo prices because a bunch of people got squeezed into that segment of the market.
Yeah, really appreciate this. This is really insightful and helpful. And I think, again, just to emphasize what you were saying there, Emma, for those that are maybe thinking of selling, I particularly think if you're in the GTA and you were thinking of selling a property that's going to be under $1 million, that pre-June sounds like a perfect time to list for your, like, I've had some friends and, you know, family members asking me about whether they should be selling real estate and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. In this market, pick the price that's like your FU price, list at that price. And if someone offers you that or more, don't regret it. You know, just like commit to whatever that pricing strategy that you're going to implement is. And I do think there's some interesting opportunities for people that maybe can work virtually. You know, if you're in a high cost of living area like Toronto and you don't have to be, now seems like an interesting time to look at maybe changing, you know, your cost of living area, because whether it's a Barrie, a London, a Kingston, all those markets seem a lot more attractive and seems like you can get a lot more bang for your buck. So again, I think, you know, if you want to get into this market, June makes a lot of sense. And if you might want to get out of this market, especially if you're sub $1 million, I think that this is the right time.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you. I think if you're contemplating that lifestyle play where, hey, I can continue to work from home indefinitely, or maybe have to, commute once or twice a month to the city, and you're contemplating that lifestyle play, it really is worth taking a harder look at your situation over the next 8 weeks to see if you can kind of capitalize and, pull out some profits and make that move quicker, because I think you'll do pretty well over the next 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So next, what I thought was interesting, I know we like to go over individual deals, but what I've been tracking are the rental prices. And they released them quarterly. They still haven't released the ones for Q1, but I'm hoping next month they'll have them. But what I thought was really interesting is going through with some condo investors right now, kind of generic, decent deals. And so I kind of grabbed 2 deals just to show any investors on your list that I actually think the opportunity in the condo market for investment right now is probably in the 1-bedroom criteria. I think a lot of people often think, hey, should I just go with a 2-bedroom? It's a little bit more expensive. I could rent it to a couple. If I needed to, I could rent it to 2 friends. It looks like there's probably a little bit of a better option for like tenant placement and diversity. And so looking at this, and thinking about the rental price drops that we've seen, to be honest, they're probably even lower now, Matt. Like I think, $2,300-$2,400 for a 2-bedroom is realistic, and closer to $1,800 is probably more realistic for a 1-bedroom. So they've probably come down even more than this. But these are the average prices from Q1 to Q4 2020. And so looking at this, you would think, okay, well, I'm probably better off just buying a 2-bedroom because it didn't drop as much. But if we go through an individual deal analysis, these are just 2 that I've done for clients recently, and we look at actual ROI without appreciation, and then with just a standard kind of 5% annual appreciation, which is pretty typical trend historically. The 1-bedrooms are actually performing better, even though the rental prices have dropped more, just as a result of maintenance fees, property taxes, looking at like an all-encompassing package. I actually think there's more opportunity to find better deals in the 1-bedroom sector. Like I've seen a couple of these, recently at $150, $200 a month out of pocket. And, last month we went through that, 2020 versus 2021 purchase and hold for investors. So I actually think the opportunity right now is there in the 1-bedroom sector. So it's less cash out of pocket too, which is, nice.
Yeah, I always appreciate you breaking this down, because I know there's a lot of people. I obviously don't cover a lot of Toronto condo content, so this is very insightful for people that are looking at this. So do you mind just giving for perspective, like what sort of neighborhood, what type of building would a condo like these be in? Yeah, so
this particular one was in Liberty Village, just popped up. I think it popped up it might pop up yesterday, actually. And then this one here was on the East End, which would be kind of like Corktown area. So I think both good neighborhoods from long-term growth potential, in my opinion. Both have good, strong kind of rental fundamentals that will get someone in there that's a AAA tenant for sure. Like that shouldn't be a problem at all. So both downtown neighborhoods, just kind of on the perimeter of downtown, which is where I think we'll see a decent amount of growth. Especially in the coming years, you can get a little bit more square footage for the same price, so lower price per square foot there. And I think that's what most buyers are looking for right now, especially as we're locked down in our condos downtown. But yeah, I think, when you look at numbers like this, we automatically just think, well, I might as well just go with the one that dropped less, right? It's just easy to look at that from a high level perspective. Yeah. I might as well just go with the 2-bedroom because the rents have stabilized maybe a bit more. But overall pricing, taking into account the entire package, 1-bedrooms are actually performing a little bit better now than 2-bedrooms, just as a result of overall pricing, like I said, maintenance fees, property taxes, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, again, really appreciate you doing the number deep dive for everyone at home. Any other slides that you want to bring up? Okay. Awesome.
I got 2 more for you. So I think one important thing is that, yes, the market is hot right now, but like we talked about, I do think the buyer pool has more options just as a result of increased inventory. There's more options, which is spreading the buyer pool out a little bit more. So to think that there aren't great deals out there, I think last month when we talked, a great deal we probably would have laughed at. This month, I think it's maybe a bit laughable, but it's not that far-fetched anymore. So this particular property is in a great neighborhood right on Jones there. I've sold for under $1 million. I think last month, if you and I were having this conversation, I would have expected that this would have went at least at 1.1 or so. So there's definitely some more frequent outliers that are coming up when it comes to actual market deals. And then, yeah, just last, I think, you know, these are kind of the new listings. What I just wanted to kind of get across here with these two particular slides is we're going to start to see some crazy numbers.
Yeah.
Right. So the blue lines are 2020. Next month, don't everyone freak out when the media is obviously coming with these crazy numbers. It's just inevitable based on the fact that literally last end of March and April, we thought we were all going to die if we went outside. And so real estate kind of fell off the face of the earth. Don't get overly involved in the media clickbait. They're going to have a lot to run with next month. So I just wanted to, set the forecast here. Like, it's going to start looking crazy. Let's just continue to look at these more intricate numbers that we've dealt with and make decisions based on that, not based on the media running with some crazy statistics that are about to come out. Yeah,
and I can already imagine some of those headlines. And I am kind of curious, though, Emma, how do you think people are going to react to those headlines? Because, like, the headlines are going to read crazy. It's going to be like, whatever. Houses almost this property almost doubled, or this condo unit almost doubled year over year. Do you think, are people going to be like, well, this is unsustainable? Or do you think people are going to be like, holy shit, now I really need to get in? Like,
I think you're going to see a lot of both, in my opinion. I think you're going to see a lot of people who are going to say, the sky is falling, the market's going to crash. And I've been seeing that since I've been in real estate for the last 6 years, and I've still yet to see that. But I also think the most important thing is just to look at what we saw, Matt. It's like, okay, well, how can we forecast over the next couple of months? Let's look at historically what's happened when these financial changes have come into effect. We're probably going to get squeezed. I think prices for condos will probably continue to increase over the next 60 days, especially as people are trying to rush to kind of get in with what's affordable. But with that being said, I don't know after June 1st, maybe we see things flatten out a little bit. Maybe we start to see people rush into the condo market. We'll kind of, have to see what happens. But I think we'll probably see a little bit of a split in terms of, buyers' reactions to this next month's worth of headlines. But I'm looking forward to having a good chuckle.
Yeah, I really look forward to exploring it with you, and always love these deep dives, Emma. I think, again, it's really important for anyone that either is in the Toronto market or thinking about getting in the Toronto market to pay attention to this data, more so now than ever before. I think that's true of anything with Canadian real estate. But before we wrap up, for anyone that's maybe been sitting on the sidelines, maybe they're intimidated by the idea of getting involved in this market or reaching out, do you mind just kind of breaking down, like, what are the different ways people can get in contact with you? What does that look like? When's the right time to get in contact or reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. So get in contact with me through connectwithemma.com. You can connect with me directly there, or if you want to send me a message on Instagram, I promise I will get back to anybody on Instagram, just a matter of time, which is @PaceBase. From a step-by-step process, when you should kind of enter and speak with any agent, I would say chat with a couple agents first, get a better understanding of like how they work, right? Our team specifically works in an educational fashion where we like to go through conversations like this with every client that we're about to onboard to make sure that we're going to be the right fit and that we're also setting the right expectations about what's going to happen in the process, and also ensuring that your expectations for what you can afford and what's realistic are also in line, and being able to educate you on that. But the first two steps are, one, get in contact with a mortgage broker and get pre-approved. In my opinion, that is the first step, especially when rates are relatively uncertain. Lock in today's rate. If you go and get pre-approved, they'll lock you in for 90 or 120 days with today's rate. If rates go up, they'll honor today's rate. If rates go down, they'll honor the lower of the two. So first step is get your finances in order and understand what you're pre-approved for. In Toronto's market, every 20 or 25K could be a drastic difference in terms of available inventory. So when someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to buy something between 550 and 6, I say we really need to be able to lock in that number, because the difference of 550 to 6 could be drastic for you. Feel comfortable and have expectations set around how this process is going to go. Then you go in, enter the market, you're already 10 steps ahead of every other buyer that's out there that hasn't done that with their agent, and you're ready to execute.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Emma. We'll throw a link to Emma's contact information in the video description down below, guys. Really do encourage you to reach out to Emma, and we'll be back next month diving deep into the data again. Appreciate it, Emma.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again to Emma for taking the time to shoot this video. If you guys want to get in contact with her, all her contact information is in the video description down below. Again, really encourage you reach out to Emma or someone on her team because it's so important that you've got an expert that's diving deep into the data, that knows their shit the way Emma knows her shit. So again, reach out to her, contact information in the video description down below. Smash the like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you next month.